Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I was driving back from my cousin's place in upstate New York. It was late, close to midnight, because I'd stayed longer than I meant to. We had a couple beers, but I sobered up before I left. I remember that because I stood out in his driveway breathing the cold air for like half an hour before getting behind the wheel. The first stretch was all highway, and it was quiet. Not a lot of people on the road that late. I had music on low and was just cruising, a little tired but not sleepy. I noticed a car about 15 minutes in, an older white sedan, headlights slightly yellow. I wouldn't have paid attention to it, except it kept a perfect distance behind me. Not tailgating, not falling back. Just right there, like a shadow. At first I thought it was just coincidence. Maybe we were headed in the same direction. But after about 30 miles, I took an exit one I always take to avoid tolls, and the white sedan took it too. Still, not weird yet. I kept an eye on it, though. The next part was where I started feeling off. I made a turn onto this two-lane country road that winds through woods and fields. I usually don't take it at night, but I figured I'd save time. No streetlights, just my high beams and occasional mailboxes flashing past. The sedan was still behind me. Same distance. Same speed. I thought, okay, maybe they live out this way too. But when I took the first random left, literally just a road I'd never been on, no signs, just to see, I watched in my rear view, and the sedan turned too. Now I was paying full attention. I tried to be logical. Maybe the driver just coincidentally needed to go this way. But then I made another turn, sharper this time, almost a U-turn back toward the main road. The car followed. No hesitation. It's hard to explain, but there was something about the way they turned that creeped me out. Not like someone casually following their GPS. It was too tight. Like they knew exactly what I was going to do. I slowed down, hoping they'd pass me. They didn't. They slowed down too. I started thinking, maybe I'm being paranoid. But I tested it a few more times. A right down a gravel road that looped through a neighborhood and came back out onto the same road. They followed. A left onto a dead end. They followed, waited at the end while I turned around, then turned around after me. That's when my heart started thumping. I didn't have cell service out there, which was the worst part. Just that little no service in the corner. I kept looking down at it, hoping for a bar. Nothing. I drove for a while longer, trying to stay calm. I remembered there was a gas station maybe 20 minutes ahead, near a bigger road. I figured I'd go there, where there'd be people and lights and maybe a working phone. But the next weird thing happened a few minutes before I got there. I came up on a four-way intersection. I signaled right. At the last second, I turned left instead. The white sedan didn't signal, but it turned left right behind me. I got this cold feeling in my chest. I turned the music off completely. I could hear the gravel crunching under my tires, and then, half a second later, under theirs. I started speeding up. So did they. I didn't want to panic, but at this point I was breathing fast. I kept checking the rear view and trying to make out the driver's face, but it was too dark. Just silhouettes. They never got close enough to flash their lights or try to pass or anything. Just mirrored every move I made. Finally, I saw the gas station sign glowing ahead, that flickery neon blue and red. I pulled in fast and parked right in front of the window, under the lights. The sedan passed by. Didn't stop. Just kept driving, slow and steady. I stayed in the car with the engine running and watched it disappear down the road. I still didn't have service. I debated going inside to ask to use the phone, but something told me to wait. A few minutes later, the sedan came back. It didn't pull in this time either. It just crept by in the opposite direction. I watched it in the mirror until it was gone again. I sat there another 5 minutes. Finally, I went inside. Told the guy at the counter that someone had been following me and asked if I could use their phone. He looked me up and down like I was overreacting, but he handed me the receiver. I called my cousin. No answer. Called 911, line rang and rang, which freaked me out even more, but someone finally picked up. I gave them the details. They said they'd send a patrol car, but it might be a while. I figured I'd just wait it out. Bought a coffee. Paced a little. Probably 20 minutes passed. A couple cars came and went, nobody sketchy. Then the door chimed, and the guy from behind the counter looked up. It was someone else. Not the guy from the sedan. This guy was mid-30s, plain clothes, jeans, and a windbreaker. Nothing unusual. He looked around like he was trying to get his bearings. Then he looked at me. Paused. Said, "Hey, do you know if there's a payphone around here?" My car broke down back up the road. I shook my head and said, "Nah, I tried. No payphones around here. No cell service either." He nodded slowly, but something was off. His eyes kept flicking toward the parking lot. Then to the counter guy. Then back to me. "You came from the north?" he asked. I just said, "Yeah." He nodded again, but I caught the smallest twitch in his cheek, like he wasn't expecting that answer. Then he smiled too quickly and said, "All right, thanks." He walked out. I peeked through the window. He didn't have a car in the lot. He just walked off, back in the direction the sedan had gone. That's when I told the guy behind the counter everything. Like, the full story. He finally looked like he believed me. He said I could wait in the back room if I wanted. I said yeah. I waited another hour, and the cop finally showed up. I told him everything, too. He took notes, walked the area, said he'd put out a notice for the car's description. But he admitted that without plates or anything, there wasn't much they could do unless it happened again. I drove home with the cop behind me most of the way, just to be safe. Never saw the sedan again. Never saw the guy from the gas station again either. But that drive, those back roads, those turns, the way that car mirrored every move, it felt like I'd been hunted. Not chased. Hunted. I still don't know what they wanted. I just know they were trying to get me alone. It was around 1 a.m. when I pulled off at this random gas station off Route 46. I'd been driving for a while, coming back from a job out near the border, and I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. I was low on gas, tired, hungry, and trying to keep myself from zoning out. I didn't even plan on stopping. I just saw the lights through the trees and figured I'd stretch my legs. It wasn't much of a place. 2 pumps, 1 flickering overhead light, and a small building with a dusty front window and a handwritten open sign taped crookedly to the door. There wasn't another car in the lot. No music playing, no night clerk visible inside. Just quiet, except for the buzzing from the light above pump 2. I pulled up to the first one and shut off the engine. The air felt thick. I could hear bugs smacking against the light, and some distant rustling, maybe trees, maybe animals. Couldn't tell. I got out, started fueling up, and kept glancing at the building. The inside lights were on, but it looked weird. Like everything was lit but still dim, if that makes sense. Like they were using old yellow bulbs or something. I didn't see anyone moving around inside. No shadow passing by, no door swinging. While the pump ran, I stretched my back and walked a small circle around the car. The place didn't even have a sign. Just the building, the pumps, and woods behind it on all sides. It felt way too quiet. The kind of quiet where you notice how loud your shoes sound when you shift your weight. Then I heard footsteps. Not fast or loud. Just soft steps from the side of the building, like someone was coming around slowly. I stopped moving and listened. 1, 2, pause. Then one more step. Then nothing. I turned and waited, and eventually a guy came into view. He looked about mid-40s, wearing a dirty gray hoodie and jeans. Kind of stocky. Not threatening, just off. His face was hard to read. Not a smile, not a frown. Just staring at me, walking like he had all the time in the world. He didn't say anything at first. Just stopped a few feet from the back of my car, looked me up and down, then said, real casual, "You still heading where I told you to?" I blinked at him. "Sorry?" He tilted his head a bit. "You still going where I said?" "That way?" He pointed down the road I came from. Then he looked at the pump, then at my car again. "You still on time?" I didn't say anything for a second. Something about his tone made me feel like I was supposed to know him. But I didn't. I was sure of that. "I think you got the wrong person," I said. He stared a little longer, then smiled. Not friendly. Just tight-lipped and quick. "Nah," he said. "I don't." He turned and walked back the way he came, disappearing behind the side of the building again. No explanation. No goodbye. I just stood there. The pump clicked off. I didn't even bother topping it off. I got in the car and locked the doors right away. For a minute I just sat there with the engine running, trying to decide if I should drive off or go inside and tell someone. Eventually I figured I should at least let the guy inside know some weirdo was hanging around. I grabbed my wallet and headed toward the door. The bell above it didn't ring when I opened it. Inside, the place was even weirder. It had that old dusty smell, like a garage that hadn't been opened in a year. The front counter had a stool behind it, but no one was there. A few shelves had snacks and bottled drinks, but they were all mismatched, like the kind of stuff you'd find at a yard sale. Half of it looked expired. I called out a couple times. "Hey, anyone here?" Nothing. No footsteps, no doors creaking. Just dead silence. I was halfway across the room when I heard something behind me. A soft creak, like wood shifting. I turned, expecting to see the guy in the hoodie again, but no one was there. I backed out slowly, keeping an eye on every corner. When I got outside, I looked around again, but the lot was empty. Then I noticed something that hadn't been there before, a car parked along the tree line, half in the shadows. Dark red sedan, lights off, no one inside that I could see. I didn't hear it pull in. I got in my car and left. Pulled out fast, trying to stay under the speed limit but not caring much if I didn't. I kept checking my mirrors. A couple minutes later, I saw headlights back in the distance. Same car. Red sedan. It didn't speed up or get too close. It just followed. Every turn I took, it followed. I tried slowing down, letting it pass didn't work. I made a random turn off the main road onto some side street I didn't recognize. The sedan followed. I started weaving through roads, trying to lose it. Took a couple turns too fast. Didn't matter, it stayed behind me. Eventually I found another gas station, one of those 24-hour chains with a big lot and a convenience store. I pulled in and parked near the front door, under the brightest lights I could find. I waited. The red sedan didn't show up. I went inside, got a coffee I didn't want, and asked the guy at the counter if he'd seen anyone coming after me. He said no. I stayed there a long time. Maybe an hour. Kept looking out the windows, scanning every car that pulled in. Nothing matched. Eventually I got back on the road. I took a longer route home, stayed on main roads, passed a few police cruisers along the way. The red sedan never showed up again. When I got home, I checked under my car, inside the trunk, even opened the hood. I don't know why. Just needed to know nothing was tampered with. Next day, I tried looking up the gas station on Google Maps. I couldn't find it. I went back along Route 46 in daylight, drove the whole stretch. Never saw the turnoff. I know where I stopped. I remember it clear as anything. But now it's just trees. No pumps. No building. Just woods. I was about halfway through a long drive home from visiting my mom when I saw him. It was around 11:30 at night, maybe closer to midnight. I just passed through a stretch of highway that felt like it went on forever. No exits, no lights, just black trees on both sides and the occasional reflective sign. He was standing on the shoulder, right past a small curve, with his thumb out. Looked like he was maybe in his 20s, wearing a black windbreaker and jeans. Kind of tall, thin, dark hair. I slowed down almost without thinking, which surprised me because I usually never pick people up, especially not at night. But he looked normal. Not dirty, not stumbling around. No crazy eyes or anything. Just standing there calmly with his thumb out, like he'd been doing it for hours. When he got in, he didn't say much. Just nodded, said thanks, and shut the door. He smelled a little like wet leaves, like he'd been walking through the woods. I asked where he was headed. He said, just up the road. I'll let you know where to stop. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He kept his eyes forward, like he was watching the road with me. After that, we were quiet for a long time. I turned the music down low, just some old rock stuff on shuffle. Every now and then I glanced over. He never looked back. It was maybe 5-10 minutes before he spoke again. He said, real flat, like he was reading from a piece of paper, "Do you believe in revenge?" I kind of laughed, thinking it was a joke or part of a story I missed. I don't know. That's a heavy question for midnight, I said, trying to keep it light. He didn't respond. Just kept staring at the road. So I asked, you mean like, in general? Like karma? Or more like personal revenge? Still nothing. I started getting uncomfortable. The air in the car felt too quiet, like even the engine noise was softer than usual. I reached over and turned the volume up a bit. A few minutes later, he said, I think revenge is fair. Sometimes it's the only fair thing. His tone was calm, almost bored. Like he was just talking about the weather. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the wheel tighter. I started thinking maybe this guy was coming from some bad situation, maybe someone screwed him over. I didn't want to ask, though. I didn't want to poke at it. The road was getting darker. No streetlights out there, just those reflectors in the middle of the lanes. My headlights felt like they were barely doing anything. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see a car behind us, but there was nothing. Just the kind of darkness where you can't tell if something's 30 feet back or 30 miles. He leaned forward suddenly, like he was squinting at something in the distance. "Right up here," he said. "Next left." There was no sign, no lights, no houses, just a narrow gravel road cutting off from the main one. I slowed down and passed it on purpose. "Sorry," I said, trying to stay casual. "Didn't see a street sign." "You sure that was it?" He didn't answer. I glanced over. He was staring at me now. No expression, just watching me. "You can turn around," he said. "It's fine." My stomach tightened. I gave a little fake laugh and said, "Yeah, maybe I'll drop you off at a gas station or something closer to town. Don't want to get lost out here." He didn't say a word. I looked ahead again. The road stretched out, empty. A mile or so up, I saw a green glow, one of those highway signs. I decided I'd stop there, pretend I needed to check something. About a minute later, he said quietly, "You're not going to take me there, are you?" My hands were sweating. I said, "Sorry, man. I just don't feel great about back roads at night." "I'm sure you get it." He stared out the window again and said, "That's okay." We were quiet again. Then I noticed something weird. He didn't have a backpack. No phone. No water bottle. Nothing. Who hitchhikes at night without even a bag? My exit plan was to pull into the first lit place I saw, leave the car running, and go inside no matter what. I figured a gas station would be safest. I could say I needed the bathroom or something. Eventually, I saw one. It was one of those 24-hour places with bright lights and a little convenience store. I pulled in fast, parked near the door, and said, "Hey, I'm just running in to grab a drink real quick." He didn't say anything. I got out, locked the car behind me, and went straight inside. The clerk was this kid, maybe 20, messing with his phone behind the counter. I walked straight up and said, "Hey, listen, I picked up this guy on the highway, and he's creeping me out. I just wanted to let you know." The kid looked outside and shrugged. "You want me to call somebody?" I said no, just wanted to be somewhere public for a minute. I pretended to browse for a bit. When I finally looked back out, the passenger door was open. The guy was gone. I waited a little longer, then cautiously walked back out. Checked around the lot. Nothing. No movement in the woods behind the station. Just silence. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove off. A few miles down the road, I started calming down. I told myself maybe he was just a weird dude having a rough night. But then, about 15 minutes later, I saw another figure on the side of the road. Same height. Same build. Same black windbreaker. Just standing there with his thumb out again. I was driving back from a buddy's place late one night, somewhere in upstate Pennsylvania. It was already past 1 a.m., and I'd taken a wrong turn about 30 minutes earlier. My phone had no signal, and the GPS kept spinning or freezing, which was stressing me out more than I wanted to admit. It was pitch black outside, no lights at all except for my headlights and the occasional glint of an old street sign. Trees on both sides, real dense. I hadn't passed another car in at least 20 minutes. I finally pulled over to the shoulder to give my GPS another shot. I figured if I just stayed still for a bit, maybe the signal would bounce back. The road was narrow, just one lane each way, no divider, no real shoulder, just some gravel and then grass. I left the engine running, turned on my hazards, and leaned over the console to mess with my phone. It was dead quiet out there. I mean really quiet. Not even bugs. Just the sound of my engine idling and a bit of wind moving through the trees. After a couple minutes of tapping at the frozen map, I heard this soft crunch behind me. Like someone stepping on gravel. I thought it was just the car settling, or maybe an animal. I glanced in my rearview mirror. Nothing. But I turned the music down anyway, even though it was already low. Then I heard a tap on the passenger window. Not loud. Just a single, quick tap. I jumped a little. My first reaction was that maybe someone needed help. I leaned over, and there was this guy standing just outside the window. Not close enough to touch the glass, but close enough that I could see him clearly in the light from the dashboard. He looked about mid-30s. Pale, kind of wiry build. Wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up and jeans. No jacket, no bag, no flashlight. His face was blank, not angry or scared, just blank. Then he said, calm as anything, get out. This isn't your car. At first I thought I misheard him. I blinked at him and said, what? He just repeated it, exact same tone. Get out. This isn't your car. I didn't move. Didn't say anything. I just stared at him. Then he tried the door handle. Thank God it was locked. He didn't yank on it or anything. Just a casual little pull, like he fully expected it to open. Then he leaned closer to the glass, not touching it, and just stood there looking at me. His expression didn't change. I sat there frozen, staring forward now, both hands on the wheel. I didn't want to hit the gas and risk hitting something if I swerved, but I sure as hell wasn't opening the door. He knocked again. This time 3 times, slow. Then he said it again, a little louder, get out. This isn't your car. I hit the door lock button just to be sure and put the car in drive. I eased forward, not fast. Just enough to roll maybe 10 feet down the road. I looked back. He hadn't moved. He stayed there, arms by his sides, head tilted slightly, just watching. I drove a bit further, maybe another 50 yards, then pulled over again. I couldn't keep driving blind. I needed to figure out where the hell I was. I turned off my headlights for a second to let my eyes adjust, thinking I might see a road sign or something. Right after the lights went out, I heard another sound. Not from the woods. From behind the car. Another crunch of gravel. I whipped the lights back on and checked all the mirrors. Nobody. I don't know if my mind was messing with me or what, but I felt like someone was right behind the car a second before I turned the lights back on. Like that weird pressure feeling when you know someone's standing close. I floored it. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just drove. The road started winding downhill a bit, and after a few minutes, I saw a small wooden sign that said Mill Pond Trail with an arrow pointing left. I figured a trailhead might have a map or something posted, maybe even a ranger station if I was lucky. So I turned in. The parking lot was just a dirt loop. Empty. No lights. But there was a little covered bulletin board near the start of the trail. I parked close to it and left the engine running. I walked up to the board, trying to keep calm, telling myself I was being paranoid. The board didn't have a map. Just a notice about ticks and something about hunting season. I turned around to head back to the car, and the guy was standing behind it. Not close. Maybe 10, 15 feet behind the bumper, just barely in the edge of the tree line. Still wearing that gray hoodie. I hadn't even heard him walk up. I backed away slowly toward the driver's side, trying not to take my eyes off him. He didn't move. Didn't say anything. When I reached the door, I got in fast and locked it again. Then I saw something that made my chest lock up. There was a second guy now. He was crouched by the front passenger tire. I hadn't seen him at all until I sat down and looked through the windshield. He had a black jacket on, and his head was down like he was looking at the wheel. I couldn't tell what he was doing. I threw it in reverse, hard. Spun the wheel and backed out of that loop so fast I nearly hit the little sign. Then I took off down the trailhead road, back toward the main one. When I got back to the highway, I just kept going straight. Eventually, I hit a small diner that was still open. I pulled in and parked right in front of the big windows, lights on all sides. There were two old guys inside drinking coffee and a waitress who looked half asleep. I stayed there for almost an hour, pretending to read a menu. I never saw anyone drive by or pull in. I got back on the road once the sun started coming up. Found my signal again a few miles out and followed the GPS home. The weirdest part? When I checked the tire the guy had been crouched next to, it looked totally fine. No slashes, no slow leak, nothing. But all the valve caps were missing. It was around midnight, maybe a little later. I was driving back from a weekend at my cousin's place in Vermont. Long drive. I'd been on the road for about 4 hours already, and there was still another hour or so to go. The highway was empty, just long stretches of trees and dark fields. My phone was charging on the dash, and the only sound in the car was the low hum of a podcast I wasn't even really listening to anymore. The first time the I-beams flashed behind me, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe someone was trying to pass and I hadn't noticed. But when I glanced in the mirror, the car wasn't close enough for that. It was maybe 6 or 7 car lengths behind. Too far back to be asking me to move over. They turned the I-beams off again after a second, so I just kept driving. But then it happened again. A few minutes later. Flash, quick, then off. I checked my lights, thinking maybe I had a tail light out or something. Everything looked normal from what I could tell. The car behind me was still hanging back, not tailgating or anything. Just there. Same distance. Not trying to pass. Over the next 20 miles or so, they kept flashing. Not constantly, but enough to make me feel weird. 5 times, maybe 6. No honking, no speeding up. Just random flashes. I tried to ignore it, but it got in my head. I turned off the podcast and rolled the window down a bit to keep myself alert. The air was cold and sharp. I remember thinking it smelled a little like what leaves in gas, which didn't make sense out in the middle of nowhere. Eventually, I pulled into this old rest area. One of those tiny ones with a single vending machine and a flickering light over the bathrooms. I thought maybe if I stopped for a minute, they'd just keep driving and I could get rid of them. I parked by the machine, got out, stretched my legs. The car pulled in behind me. It parked 2 spots over. I froze for a second, then acted like I hadn't noticed. I walked to the vending machine, grabbed a bottle of water, and tried to stay casual. My hands were shaking a little. The guy in the other car didn't get out. I could see him in the driver's seat, head down like he was messing with his phone or something. After a couple minutes, I got back in my car. I sat there with the engine running, watching my mirrors. Nothing. Just him sitting there. I put the car in drive and slowly pulled out. He didn't move. I waited until I was back on the highway before checking the mirror again. He was behind me. Same distance. Same flashing. That's when I really started getting scared. My chest felt tight, like it was harder to breathe. I kept checking my rear view every few seconds. He was still back there, keeping perfect pace. Whenever I sped up, he did too. Not tailgating, just keeping up. Another 20 minutes went by like that. Then he flashed again, 3 quick bursts this time. I pulled over. I didn't even think about it, I just jerked the wheel onto the shoulder and hit the brakes hard. Gravel ticked up under the tires. The car behind me slowed and pulled up beside me, stopping just a little ahead. I cracked my window, not all the way, just a couple inches. My heart was pounding. The guy got out and walked over. He looked mid-40s, maybe older. Heavy jacket, ball cap, kind of rough looking but not sketchy. He didn't come right up to my window, he stopped a few feet away with his hands up, like he was trying to show me he wasn't a threat. Then he said, "I'm sorry if I scared you, but someone just crawled out of your trunk." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. He looked serious. Not panicked, not dramatic. Just very direct. I saw the trunk bounce about 10 minutes ago. A few minutes later, I saw a hand reach up and close it. Then nothing. But just now, it opened again, someone rolled out and ran into the woods. I was frozen. I didn't know what to say. He kept talking, quiet and calm. I thought maybe you knew them at first, but then they ducked and ran when the lights hit. I figured you had no idea. That's why I flashed. I opened the door and stepped out slowly. My legs felt weird, like I'd been sitting too long, but I hadn't. We walked to the back of my car together. The trunk was closed. I unlocked it and lifted it open. Empty. Totally empty. No sign of anything weird, nothing disturbed. Just the spare tire and the little roadside kit I keep back there. The guy scratched the back of his neck. They must have jumped when we hit that last bend. There was a spot where the trees came up real close. He offered to call the cops, but I told him I would. I didn't want to follow him or have him follow me. Even if he was telling the truth, which, honestly, I believed him, I still didn't want to be around anyone right then. He nodded, got in his car, and pulled off down the road. I sat there for a bit, watching the woods. Didn't see anything. When I finally got home, after checking the back seat a dozen times along the way, I took the car into a garage the next morning. I asked them to check the trunk lock, see if anything was off. They said everything looked fine. Nothing forced, nothing broken. But the weird thing was, there were smudges on the inside of the trunk lid. Like someone had touched it with dirty fingers. For smears, like fingertips. Right near the emergency release handle. I was heading home from a late shift. It was close to 11:30, maybe midnight. I don't remember exactly. I just remember being tired, that kind of tired where your eyes start to sting and the inside of your skull feels heavy. The city was mostly quiet by then. I wasn't far from my apartment, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Just a couple more lights and I'd be on my block. I stopped at a red light on Main and 5th, one of those lawn lights that always seems to take forever even when no one's around. There were only 2 lanes, me and the left, and a guy who pulled up in an old, dull red SUV on the right. I didn't really look at him at first. I was just zoned out, listening to the hum of my engine and waiting for the green. But then I noticed this flicker of light from the corner of my eye, like a phone screen lighting up. I turned my head just slightly, didn't want to make it obvious, and I saw that the guy in the SUV had his phone pointed at my car. Like, angled right at me. At first I thought maybe he was texting or had his GPS up. But then he held it up again, deliberately. And I watched the little flash go off. Not a huge burst or anything, just that small LED flick. He was taking a picture. Of me. I kind of just stared at him for a second. He didn't react, didn't wave or give a friendly nod or anything. Just stared through the window, phone still in his hand, screen still aimed right at me. The light turned green and I waited a beat, expecting him to go ahead, but he didn't. He just sat there. So I eased forward through the intersection, and then he pulled out right after me, staying directly beside my car for a moment, like he was matching my speed. Then he drifted behind me and stayed there. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he thought I was someone else. Maybe he liked my car. People do dumb stuff sometimes. But after a couple blocks, I changed lanes. He changed right after me. I made a right at the next light, not the turn I normally take, and glanced in my mirror. He turned, too. That was the first time my stomach dropped a little. I kept going, turned left at the next stop sign, which curved into a more residential area. He followed again. I started driving slower, hoping maybe he'd pass me if he was in a hurry or if this was all some coincidence. He didn't pass. He stayed 2, maybe 3 car lengths behind. Not tailgating. Just there. I did a loop around the neighborhood, thinking I was being paranoid, that I'd circle back to my normal route and he'd eventually veer off. But every single turn, every random street, he stayed behind me. I took a few sharper corners, not reckless, just enough to see if he'd slip up. But he kept pace like he knew exactly where I was going. At one point, I rolled to a stop at a 4-way and waited. Like, waited way too long. Just parked there. Cars don't usually do that unless they're stalling or lost. He didn't honk. Didn't even inch forward. Just stayed still, engine running. I pulled through the intersection. He did too. At this point, I was sweating. My hands were damp on the wheel. I turned my radio off so I could hear better, footsteps, engines, anything. I couldn't hear much besides the sound of my tires and his faintly behind me. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want this guy to know where I lived. So I turned back toward a busier part of town, hoping maybe I'd find a cop or at least some other cars. A gas station was coming up, the kind with the bright LED canopy and security cameras. I pulled in fast and parked near the front, angled my car so it would be caught by the camera on the corner. He drove by. Just kept going, didn't turn in. I waited a minute. Then 3. Kept looking in all my mirrors, expecting him to circle back or pull in from another entrance. Nothing. I figured maybe he finally got the hint and took off. I didn't get out of the car. Just sat there, pretending to check my phone, trying to decide if I should go inside or just wait longer. Then I saw the SUV again. Not from the front, but in the rear view. He'd looped around and was coming back from the opposite direction. He slowed down as he passed the gas station entrance, then kept driving. Not gone. Just watching. I didn't like how that felt. So I stayed put for a while longer, 15, maybe 20 minutes. I didn't see him again. A few other cars came and went. I figured it was safe. I took a different road home. It added 10 minutes, but I didn't see his SUV again. No headlights following, no turns matched. I thought that was it. I was tense the whole drive, but I made it home and parked out front like always. I sat in the car for a while, just in case. Then finally grabbed my bag and headed inside. I checked out the window a couple times that night but didn't see anything weird. Eventually, I crashed. Next morning, I noticed something. My license plate was smudged. Like, right where the numbers are. It looked like someone had wiped it with their fingers. The dust and pollen on it had been disturbed, smeared into these little arcs. It wasn't raining. I hadn't gone through a car wash. And I hadn't parked under any trees. That creeped me out more than the following, honestly. I started wondering if maybe he'd taken a photo of the plate and then come back later. Or maybe someone else had. I don't know. I still don't know. I got a dash cam after that. Front and back. And I stopped driving that late unless I had to. If I did, I'd take a totally different route every time. And I always check my mirrors. My back tire blew out around 11:40 p.m., maybe closer to midnight. I was about 20 miles outside of town, middle of nowhere. I'd taken the long way home after visiting my sister, just felt like driving and clearing my head. The road was a 2-lane stretch, not much traffic even during the day, and at night it was dead quiet. I'd passed maybe 2 cars in the last half hour before it happened. It wasn't loud, just a pop, and then the car started pulling hard to the right. I managed to get it onto the shoulder without freaking out. I sat there for a second, hazard lights ticking. There was no shoulder light, no signs, just me and the dead dark trees past the ditch. I got out and checked. The back passenger tire was shredded. I had a donut in the trunk, but I hadn't changed a tire in years. Still, I figured I'd try. I got everything out, and I was crouched next to the wheel with the jack when I heard a car slow down behind me. The tires crackled on the gravel, and headlights spilled over my legs. I stood up fast and turned. It was a dark SUV. I couldn't make out the driver at first because the lights were in my face. Then they switched off, and the guy rolled down his window a few inches. "You all right?" he called out. I nodded, but I stepped back a little. "Yeah, just changing the tire." "You need help?" "I'm good, thanks." He didn't drive away. He just stayed there, engine running. I noticed his window was only cracked open, like 2 fingers width. "You sure?" he said again. Not a great spot to be stuck. "I appreciate it, but I'm okay." He didn't answer. Just sat there. I waited, trying not to look like I was watching him too hard. After a few seconds, he rolled up the window and pulled forward slowly. He didn't speed off, just crept ahead and then parked maybe 30 yards up the road, on the opposite shoulder. His taillights stayed on. I stood there holding the jack, watching those red lights. I thought maybe he was waiting for something. Maybe making a call, or just pulling over to get out and walk back to help. But the doors never opened. After maybe 5 minutes, I tried to shake it off. I got down and started working on the lug nuts, glancing up every so often. His car never moved. At one point the brake lights flared like he tapped them, then dimmed again. I started sweating, even though it was probably 50 degrees out. My hands weren't working right, and I kept fumbling the wrench. The guy's SUV just sat there. Then I heard a car door shut. I froze. Looked up. His SUV was still shut up tight. I stood slowly and scanned around. No one. Just trees and road. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe a door slam echoed from further away. But there were no other cars. No houses. Nothing. I packed up the tools. Decided to drive on the flat if I had to. As I shoved the jack back in the trunk, I heard gravel crunching, like footsteps. I slammed the trunk and turned toward the sound. Nothing. I was done playing around. I got in the car, started it, and pulled back onto the road. I passed his SUV, and I glanced over. I could barely see him, his head turned slightly, like he was watching me. He didn't move. I drove about 5 miles on the flat until I hit a wide turnout. I pulled over, left the car running, and called roadside assistance. They said a tow would be out in about 45 minutes. I sat there, scanning my mirrors, doors locked. Every car that passed made me flinch. About 20 minutes later, headlights showed up in my rearview mirror. It was the same SUV. I knew because of the shape of the headlights, one of them had a faint flicker, like it wasn't fully secure. I slid down in my seat a little. He didn't stop behind me. He slowed, then pulled off the road about 30 feet ahead this time. Same as before, he just sat there, taillights glowing. No one got out. I called 911. Told them what was happening, gave them my location. They said a deputy was en route and to stay in the car. I kept the line open until I saw another set of headlights coming up behind. The SUV pulled away before the deputy even got close. Didn't speed, didn't swerve. Just pulled back onto the road and vanished into the dark. The deputy was nice enough. He stood by until the tow guy came. I didn't tell him everything, just said the guy had stopped, made me uncomfortable, then followed me. He offered to take a report, but I said I just wanted to go home. They loaded up the car, and I rode with the tow guy. He didn't talk much, and that was fine by me. I thought that was the end of it. But 3 days later, I found something in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper. It said, "Next time, just get in the car." It was around 10:30 at night. I was in the living room with the TV on low, not really watching anything, just kinda zoning out after a long day. The lights were off except for a little lamp in the corner. I live alone in a one-story house, kind of tucked away at the end of a short dead-end road. Quiet neighborhood. Not much traffic, especially that late. I heard the sound of tires crunching over gravel and slowed down outside. Not speedy, not rolling through, just easing in real careful. I didn't think much of it at first. Could have been a neighbor's friend turning around, maybe. Happens sometimes. But the engine didn't keep moving. It idled. After a few seconds, I muted the TV. I leaned a little to the side on the couch and peeked out the front window. There was a white van sitting in my driveway. Plain. No logo or anything. Just white, kind of dingy. One headlight was a little dimmer than the other. I waited, expecting someone to get out or maybe just reverse and leave, but nothing happened. The engine just sat there, humming. Then the passenger door opened, and a guy stepped out. He looked like he could have been a delivery driver, I guess. Maybe late 30s, dark hair, hoodie, ball cap. He had a smallish box in one hand, nothing big. He stood there for a second, like he was double-checking the address on the side of the house. But I hadn't ordered anything. I was sure of it. I got up and walked quietly to the door. I didn't open it, just looked through the peephole. He was walking up the steps to my porch, slow and casual, like he did this every day. He set the box down right in front of the door and then knocked. Just once. Not super hard, but enough to be heard. I didn't say anything. After maybe 5 seconds, he knocked again. A little louder. I called out through the door. "Who is it?" He paused, then said, "Delivery." "For what?" "Got a package here for you." "From who?" He didn't answer right away. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the brim of the hat through the peephole, angled slightly down. Then he said, "I just deliver 'em." I didn't open the door. I kept looking at him, trying to get a read. He wasn't wearing any company logo. Not Amazon, not FedEx, nothing. Even the box was plain brown. No tape, no label that I could see from that angle. I said, "I didn't order anything." He shrugged. "It's got your address." "Let me see it." He didn't move for a second. Then he bent down, turned the box slightly so it faced the door, but it was too dark to read anything through the peephole. I said, "What company are you with?" He didn't answer. Just stood there. Then he leaned forward a little and said, "You gonna open the door or not?" I backed away from the door and didn't say anything. Just stood there. After a few seconds, he knocked again. This time, 3 times, slower, heavier. Then he said, quieter, "Come on, man. Don't make this weird." That was enough for me. I went to the kitchen and grabbed my phone, pulled up the security cam app. I only had one camera mounted on the front porch. It didn't have audio, just a wide-angle view, but it was night vision equipped. I loaded it up. The guy was still standing there, facing the door, kind of rocking on his heels. I took a screenshot and texted it to my buddy Josh, just in case. Didn't explain much, just said, "You recognize this guy?" and added, "Some delivery BS at my place RN." Then I went back to the door. I still didn't open it. Just said, "You need to leave. Now." He didn't move. I'm not opening this door. Finally, he turned and walked off the porch. I heard his steps go down, then back toward the van. I waited until I heard the driver door open and shut. The engine was still on. I went to the side window to watch. He wasn't pulling out. He just sat there. I texted Josh again. "He's not leaving." Josh replied fast, "Call the cops." I didn't want to jump to that unless it got worse. But I was thinking about it. I kept watching the van. 10 minutes passed. Still no movement. Then the headlights cut off. I froze. The engine was still going, but now it was just sitting dark at the edge of my driveway. That's when I called 911. I told them everything. The guy's clothes, the box, the van, how he wasn't answering questions, how he hadn't left. They said they'd send a unit out. I kept watching the van. I didn't see the door open again, but I couldn't be sure. No dome light came on. No movement. Maybe 10 minutes later, 2 sets of headlights came down the road. One was a cruiser, the other an unmarked SUV. They pulled in slow. Soon as their lights hit the van, the driver door opened, and the guy got out fast. He tried to walk up to the officers like it was nothing. They talked for a few minutes. I couldn't hear anything from inside. One of the cops walked up to my porch. I opened the door just a crack and kept the chain on. He asked me if I knew the guy. I said absolutely not. He asked if I was expecting a delivery. I told him again, no. He asked if the guy had said anything else. I mentioned the weird "don't make it weird" line. That got him to frown. I asked what was in the box. He looked back at his partner, then said it was empty. They talked with the guy a while longer. Eventually, they cuffed him. One of the officers came back and said they were detaining him for trespassing and possibly impersonating a delivery driver, but he wasn't making much sense. They were going to take him in for questioning. The van got towed. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. After they left, I stood on my porch for a bit just looking at where the van had been. The box was still there. They said it was harmless, but I still didn't want it in my house. I left it there until morning and then tossed it in a dumpster a few blocks away. Josh came over the next day and said the guy didn't look familiar. I asked around the neighbors too. Nobody had seen the van before. A few weeks later, I called the department to follow up. They said the guy had no ID, gave them a fake name, and eventually got transferred to a psych facility. Wouldn't say anything about why he was there or what he wanted. Just kept saying he had a delivery to make. Over and over. I upgraded my cameras after that. Added 2 more, plus a motion light. Haven't seen that van again. But I still check the feed every night before bed. Just in case. I was driving back home from a weekend trip and had stopped at a rest stop to stretch my legs. It was around midnight, and the place was practically empty. One of those quiet rest areas where you're just trying to get in and out without seeing anyone. It was dark, but there were a few lights from the bathrooms and the parking lot. I went into the restroom, and it was one of those awkwardly quiet ones. No music, no sounds, just the hum of the lights above me and the sound of my own footsteps echoing off the tile. I didn't take long, just washed my hands and checked my reflection in the mirror. You know, the usual. I was ready to get back on the road, so I walked out of the bathroom and made my way to the car. It was parked not far from the entrance, about halfway down the lot. I remember thinking how empty it was, how quiet everything felt. I was the only one at the far end, with just a couple of trucks parked at the other end. I didn't think anything of it. When I got to where I thought I'd parked, I froze. My car wasn't there. I stood there for a second, staring at the empty space. Maybe I was tired or just not thinking straight, but I figured I must have parked somewhere else, so I walked up and down the rows, scanning every spot. It wasn't like I was looking for a particular car. I knew it was mine because of the rust spot on the front bumper. But it wasn't there. I checked the lot again. No car. It was getting colder, and I could feel myself starting to panic, but I tried to stay calm. I had just seen the car. I was certain it was parked there. I started pacing around, trying to wrap my mind around it. Maybe I was going crazy. Maybe I left the keys on top of the car, and someone had taken it. Maybe it was just a weird mistake, but that didn't make sense. I checked my pockets, even though I knew I hadn't taken anything out, but nothing. No keys, no wallet, no phone. I could feel my stomach drop. The dread started to set in. I went back to the bathroom, hoping maybe I dropped something, but it was empty now. I was starting to freak out at this point. There were no other cars around, and the trucks parked in the lot weren't moving. I went to the vending machines to try and get some kind of help, but there was nobody inside the small area. I pressed the button to call for help at the rest stop, but it just buzzed a few times before cutting off. Then I heard something. It was faint at first, just the sound of footsteps. I turned quickly, half expecting to see a fellow traveler or someone else who was stuck there, but no one was around. The footsteps weren't loud or close, but they were coming from somewhere behind the building. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know what to do. I had no phone, no way to call anyone. The only thing I could think was to walk toward the parking lot's entrance and see if there was anyone around. As I made my way out, I noticed a man standing by one of the truck cabs. He didn't look out of place, but something about his stance made me uneasy. He was just standing there, staring at the lot, not moving, not doing anything. I took a few steps closer, but when I did, he turned and started walking toward the far side of the lot, away from the road. I thought about going back to the bathroom and just sitting there, waiting for the panic to pass, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The man's gaze had lingered on me for too long, and I couldn't figure out why he was there. Why had he been standing so still? I made my way to the exit of the rest stop, looking around constantly. The darkness outside felt suffocating, and I could hear the wind picking up. There was no one else around. The only car was mine, and it wasn't where I left it. I stepped into the parking lot again, my eyes scanning the area for my car, my phone, anything that could give me some sense of control. The closer I got to the lot's entrance, the more I realized how completely alone I was. The trucks weren't moving, no one was passing by, and the lights seemed dimmer than before. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a door opening, just behind me. My heart dropped. I turned quickly, expecting the man I had seen earlier to be there, but no one was standing in the lot. The door had opened from one of the trucks. I didn't know why it felt so ominous, but it did. Something was wrong. My chest felt tight, and I started to walk faster, hoping I could make it to the main road where I could find some sign of life. But before I could take another step, I heard the sound of tires on gravel, soft at first, then louder as if a car was pulling in. I didn't even have to look to know that it was mine. There was no other car around, and the sound was coming from the direction where I'd last seen my car. I turned to look. A sedan had pulled up to the edge of the lot, close to where my car had been. There was no one in the driver's seat, and the car's lights were off. But the windows were rolled down. I couldn't move. The sight of that empty car, parked exactly where my car should have been, made everything inside of me freeze. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, a figure stepped out from behind the car. It was a man. He didn't say anything. He just walked toward me, his steps measured and slow. I could see his face now, lit by the dim light coming from the restroom. His eyes were locked on me. I didn't know what to do. My legs were heavy, like they were cemented to the ground. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but not particularly menacing. I didn't answer at first. What could I say? I was terrified, and I had no idea where my car or my stuff was. Everything felt wrong. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" he asked again, stepping closer, but still not in a way that felt threatening. I didn't even respond. I just backed up a few steps, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, I turned and ran for the exit, not looking back once. I didn't stop until I hit the first main road, where I flagged down a passing car. I don't know who that man was or where he came from, but I never went back to that rest stop again. I don't know what happened to my car. I don't know what happened to my phone or my wallet. But I know I'll never forget the sound of that door opening and the way he just stood there, waiting. It was a dark, quiet night. I had been driving for hours on the highway, heading home after visiting my parents. The roads were pretty empty, just the occasional car passing by in the opposite direction. I remember feeling a little sleepy, but I didn't want to stop because I was just ready to get home. The clock on the dashboard said it was around 2:30 a.m. The only light came from my headlights and the faint glow of streetlights far off in the distance. It was just me, the road, and the night. Then, I saw him. I almost didn't notice at first. A figure standing by the side of the road, waving their arms frantically. My first thought was that it was someone who needed help, maybe a flat tire or something. I slowed down, just to make sure I wasn't passing someone in real trouble. But as I got closer, I noticed something wasn't quite right. He wasn't just waving for attention, he was almost jumping around, like he was desperate. Something in the back of my mind told me to keep going, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The guy seemed too frantic, too wild. His arms were flailing, but his face was hidden in the shadows. It wasn't until I was almost past him that he took a few quick steps forward and waved directly at me, practically running into the road. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe I was just being a good person. Maybe I felt bad for him. It was one of those split-second decisions that in hindsight felt like the wrong one. I pulled over, maybe 15 feet away from him. I rolled down the window, just a little bit, enough to hear him if he said something. He was standing there, now just a few feet from my car, staring at me. He didn't say anything right away, which made me feel uneasy. There was this weird silence, like everything around us had just paused. I waited for him to say something, but all he did was stand there, his hand still raised like he wanted to ask something. I couldn't make out his expression, it was too dark, but I could see his eyes darting around, and it wasn't like a normal look. It was like he was watching something, or maybe he was looking for something. I cracked the window open a little more, trying to make it less awkward. "Are you okay?" I asked. He didn't respond, just kept staring at me. It felt like a long time, but it was probably only a few seconds. I felt the blood leave my face. It didn't make sense. Who stands by the side of the road at 2:30 a.m. and doesn't speak when someone pulls over to help? Who does that? Finally, after what felt like forever, he took a step closer to the car. Not too close, but enough that I could hear his breathing. It was heavy, like he'd been running. Or maybe something else. His hands were shaking, and I noticed they weren't just shaking from the cold. Something was off. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" I asked, my voice a little shaky, unsure if I should be scared. I figured if I was going to help, maybe I could just get him in the car, drop him off somewhere public. Then I could leave. No harm, right? He didn't say anything. That's when it happened. He suddenly reached for the door handle, yanked it as if he was trying to open it. My heart stopped. The door was locked, thankfully, but the way he tried to open it was like he wasn't even thinking. Just grabbing for it like it was the only thing on his mind. And there was no warning, no explanation. He didn't say I need help, didn't ask for anything. He just tried to get in. I pulled my hand back from the window, hitting the lock button instinctively. I started to drive off, not fast, just enough to get away from him, but not too fast so it wouldn't seem like I was panicking. As I rolled away, I looked in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see him still standing there. But he was walking behind me now, slowly, like he was following my car. Not running, not even looking directly at me. He just walked behind, like it was the most normal thing to do. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep driving forever. But I didn't want to stop again, either. So I just kept going, my hands tight on the wheel, my heart thumping in my chest. The road stretched on forever, and I kept checking the mirror, waiting for him to disappear. But he stayed behind me, not too far back. I couldn't tell how long he was following me. My mind was racing, and all I could focus on was the feeling of someone watching me from behind. It wasn't just the rearview mirror that made me feel that way. It was the quiet, the emptiness of the road, the fact that nobody else was around. Eventually, I passed an exit ramp and decided to take it. It was a gamble, I know, but I figured if I could get off the main highway, I might be able to find a gas station or some other place with people. something where I wouldn't be completely alone. I turned off, hoping he wouldn't follow, but when I glanced back, he was still behind me. Not as close as before, but enough to make my stomach turn. I drove like that for a while, maybe 10 minutes, just going through side roads that were a little more populated. Still, nobody else on the road. I didn't see him anymore, but I didn't dare stop to look around. When I finally pulled into a gas station, I parked in the well-lit area near the pumps, hoping he wouldn't follow. I sat there for a moment, just listening to the hum of the lights overhead. I checked my mirrors again. Nothing. It felt like the longest moment of my life. But finally, I took a deep breath and got out of the car. I didn't even lock it. I just needed to get inside and be around other people. As I walked toward the door, I looked back one last time. The night was still. Empty. I don't know who that guy was or why he acted the way he did. I don't know if he was trying to rob me or hurt me or if something else was going on. But I know one thing, I'll never stop for anyone on the side of the road again, no matter what. I was driving home after a long day of work, and I had taken the highway to save time. It was late, around 2 a.m. or so, and the road was completely empty, except for the occasional car passing by in the opposite direction. The headlights cut through the darkness, but it felt like there was no one else on the road for miles. It was just me, the highway, and the sound of my tires on the asphalt. I had the music low, just enough to keep me awake, but the silence outside made everything feel more isolated than usual. Everything was fine at first. But about 30 minutes into my drive, I heard it. A loud thumping sound, like something heavy hitting the trunk of my car. I flinched and instinctively glanced in my rearview mirror. There was nothing unusual, just the empty road behind me. I told myself it was probably just something in the trunk shifting, maybe my gym bag or something else I had thrown back there earlier. But then I heard it again. Thump. 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 3 solid hits, spaced out like whatever it was had some rhythm to it. I froze. My stomach dropped. There was no way anything in my trunk could be moving on its own. I had made sure everything was packed properly before leaving. And why would it make that kind of noise? I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing, right? I couldn't let myself get paranoid. The road was so empty, I couldn't even remember when the last car had passed. I just kept driving, trying to ignore it. But the thumping came again, louder this time. It felt like it was right behind me, like someone was hitting the trunk with a fist. My heart started racing, and I glanced over my shoulder at the rearview mirror again. The darkness was still there, no sign of any other cars, but the thumping didn't stop. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled off onto the shoulder, my tires crunching against the gravel. I didn't want to open the trunk in the middle of nowhere. It seemed too risky. But I also couldn't just keep driving without checking. I put the car in park, my hands shaking as I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. The thumping stopped. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. I sat there, in the stillness, trying to calm my breath. But then I heard something else. A rustling noise, soft at first, but enough to make me tense up. It came from the direction of the trunk, like something moving around in there. I couldn't stay in the car anymore. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but the fear was overwhelming. I grabbed my phone, just to make sure I had it with me, even though I wasn't sure what I would do with it. There was no one around for miles, no cell service out here, nothing. Just me and whatever was in the trunk. I opened the door slowly, trying to keep as quiet as possible. The night air hit me hard, cold and dry, making my skin prickle. My headlights cast long shadows on the road, stretching across the empty asphalt. I was out of the car now, standing on the shoulder, looking at the trunk. I don't know what I thought I would find. A flat tire? A runaway piece of luggage? But I didn't want to know. The fear was sharp, like a knife in my gut. What if someone had gotten into my trunk? What if someone was hiding in there? The thumping was too deliberate to be anything natural. I took a deep breath, summoning whatever courage I had left, and walked to the back of the car. I reached for the trunk latch, hesitating for just a second. I could still hear that faint rustling, like something shifting inside. My fingers were cold as I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. Nothing. The trunk was empty. I stood there for a moment, staring into the dark, wide-open space. My breath came out in shallow gasps. Maybe I was just losing it. Maybe the noise was from something else. But the rustling had been too real. The thumping had been too real. I slammed the trunk shut, my heart racing. I quickly got back into the car and locked the doors. I didn't want to look back. I didn't want to stay out there for 1 second longer than I had to. I started the car and pulled back onto the highway, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. I drove for a few more miles, trying to calm my nerves, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. The thumping. This time it was louder, more forceful, like whatever was in my trunk was trying to break its way out. I nearly swerved off the road, my heart leaping into my throat. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I glanced into the rearview mirror. I could see my own reflection, my wide, scared eyes staring back at me. There was no one behind me. Just the road. The empty highway. But the thumping didn't stop. It was coming from inside my trunk, louder now, almost rhythmic, like it was trying to communicate with me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was on the verge of a panic attack, my chest tightening as I tried to focus on the road. I needed to get out of there. I didn't know what was in my trunk, but I couldn't take any chances. My foot slammed on the gas, pushing the car faster, hoping to outrun whatever was in the back. But the thumping just kept going, like it was following me. Every mile felt like an eternity. The noise was relentless, pounding in the background, never giving me a second to calm down. I could hear it over the sound of the engine, over the wind rushing past. I tried to block it out, to focus on the road, but it wouldn't stop. Finally, I saw headlights in the distance. Another car. The first one I'd seen in what felt like hours. I didn't care if they thought I was crazy. I didn't care about anything except getting some help. I pulled into the shoulder, almost too fast, and stopped right behind the other car, hoping they would notice me. I didn't even get out of my car. I just sat there, staring at the other vehicle, my hands still gripping the wheel. I kept hearing the thumping, even though I had stopped. My heart pounded in my chest, every muscle tense, waiting for something, anything to happen. The car in front of me didn't move. I had no idea if they were going to help or not. But when the thumping stopped, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence, or maybe it was something worse. I don't know what happened, and I never want to find out. All I know is that when I finally left that highway, I didn't look back. I don't know what I was thinking when I decided to take that road. It was already late, around 1 a.m., and I was driving back from a friend's place. The highway I usually take was backed up with traffic due to some construction, so I figured I'd cut through this back road I've driven before. It wasn't the best option, but it was quiet, and I just wanted to get home. The air felt still, like the world was holding its breath. The only sound was the hum of my tires on the asphalt, and the occasional click of the blinker as I passed through small intersections. I didn't expect anything weird to happen. It was just another drive, the kind where you're alone with your thoughts and the road. But the first thing I noticed was the streetlights. They were spaced really far apart, and some of them were flickering, casting this weird, dim light. It made everything feel more isolated, like I was in the middle of nowhere, with only the car and the occasional rustling of leaves for company. The road was narrow, and there weren't any houses or buildings around, just fields and trees that blurred in the dark. I had been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I first felt it. That feeling like I wasn't alone. Like someone was watching me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just tired, but I couldn't shake the unease. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind me, but every time I looked, there was nothing. Just darkness, stretching out behind me. But the longer I drove, the more the feeling lingered. It wasn't just the quiet or the darkness, something felt off. I checked the mirror again. And this time, I swear I saw something move. At first, I thought it was just the shadows, but there was a figure in the back seat of my car. I blinked and looked again. Nothing. The seat was empty. I told myself I must have imagined it, that I was just too tired. I kept driving, but I couldn't shake the thought. I glanced in the mirror again, more out of habit than anything else. But this time, the figure was still there. It was faint, but I could make out the outline of a person sitting in the back. My heart skipped a beat. I almost pulled over to check, but then I thought about it logically. If someone was hiding in my back seat, they'd have to be really quiet. And it didn't make sense. I hadn't heard anyone get in, and the doors were locked. I would have noticed if someone had gotten in while I was driving. But the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. I could barely make out the shape in the mirror. It looked like a person slouched in the back seat, their head resting against the headrest. I wasn't sure if they were asleep or if they were just hunched over. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. I tried to focus on the road, but I kept glancing back every few seconds. Each time I looked, the person seemed to shift a little. They were in a slightly different position, like they were moving around, even though I hadn't heard a sound. I started to panic. Was I losing my mind? Was I just tired, imagining things? But it didn't feel like that. It felt real. Every time I checked, that person was closer to the edge of the seat, their shoulders moving slightly, like they were adjusting their position. I turned up the radio to drown out the silence, but that didn't help. The feeling was still there, like someone was sitting just behind me, watching my every move. I kept checking the mirror, but the figure was always shifting. 1 second they were sitting up straight, the next their head was tilted toward the window, as if they were trying to peer out. It didn't make sense. I hadn't heard anything, no door opening, no footsteps. And my back seat was dark. I sped up, thinking maybe I could outrun whatever was happening. Maybe if I just drove faster, I could get to a more populated area. But the faster I drove, the more I noticed the subtle shifts in the back seat. It was like whoever or whatever was there was getting closer, inch by inch, despite not making a sound. I checked the mirror again, and this time, the figure was practically right behind me. I froze. The person was sitting up now, their head turned slightly toward me, almost like they were looking over my shoulder. I couldn't see their face, just a vague outline of them. I had to pull over. I slammed on the brakes and yanked the wheel to the side, the tires screeching as I came to a stop on the shoulder of the road. The car shook, and I sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to steady myself. My pulse was pounding in my ears, my skin crawling. I didn't know what to do. Should I get out? Should I call someone? I looked in the rearview mirror one last time, trying to see if the figure was still there. But now, the back seat was empty. Just the shadows. Nothing else. I was half relieved, but still shaken. I opened the door, planning to get out and check, but before I could move, I heard something. A soft scrape, like fabric shifting in the back seat. I turned my head toward the sound, and that's when I saw it, the figure. They were no longer sitting. They were standing, just behind my seat, their face inches from mine. I didn't think. I just slammed the car into gear and sped off, tearing down the road as fast as I could. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I didn't look back again. I didn't want to. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station. I parked by the lights, sat there for a minute to calm myself, then looked around. There was no one. No one had followed me. I don't know who or what it was. I don't know if I was just imagining it all or if something was really back there. But I'm telling you, I felt it. I know I wasn't just being paranoid. The way that figure kept shifting, inching closer, that wasn't something I could have made up in my head. I don't know if someone was messing with me, or if I picked up a stranger somewhere without realizing it, but I don't take that road anymore. I don't drive at night if I can help it. And I always check my back seat. Always. I'll never forget that night. It started off like any other long drive. I had just finished a late shift at work, and I was driving home, trying to unwind, the quiet of the empty road making me feel like I could finally breathe. I'd taken this route dozens of times before, just the kind of road you'd want to drive down if you needed some peace. It's a two-lane highway, tucked away in the middle of nowhere, no streetlights, just miles of dark trees and fields. The kind of place you'd never expect to see anyone else on at this time of night. It was about 2 a.m., and the only thing that kept me company was the hum of my car engine. I was getting kind of tired, but not enough to pull over yet. The road twisted a bit ahead, and I was just about to round a bend when I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just some car behind me. Nothing unusual. But the headlights came up fast. Too fast. I glanced at the mirror again. It wasn't just that the car was close, it was speeding. I could hear the engine roaring as it came up behind me, and within a few seconds, it was right on my bumper. I didn't feel like speeding, so I kept my pace steady, but this car wasn't backing off. It stayed glued to my tail, its headlights blinding me, flashing in my rearview mirror. I wasn't sure if they were trying to get me to speed up or if they just wanted me to pull over. I looked over at the side of the road, thinking maybe I should just stop and let them pass. But there wasn't anywhere to pull over, just trees and fields for miles. So, I did the next thing that came to mind. I tapped my brakes, just to see if they'd back off. Maybe they'd get the hint. Instead of backing off, the car swerved into the other lane and sped past me. It was a black sedan, the kind that blends into the night. I didn't get a good look at the driver, but I saw the headlights quickly grow dim as the car sped ahead. For a second, I thought maybe that was the end of it. They'd pass me, and I could keep driving. But no! I barely had time to process what was happening when the sedan slammed on its brakes. It skidded slightly before it came to a stop, not in a parking lot or on the shoulder, but in the middle of the road, blocking my path. The car was sideways now, straddling both lanes. No blinkers. No warning. Just there, like the driver had decided to make a stand. I don't know why, but my first instinct was to keep driving. I thought maybe they were just pulling over to check something or to fix something in their car. But I was too far from any other vehicles or lights. There was no reason for anyone to stop in the middle of nowhere like that, especially in the middle of the night. And they weren't moving. I slowed down, unsure of what to do. Should I try to go around them? It was a narrow road, and the car was parked right in the center, blocking me completely. I wasn't about to just stop and sit there, but I didn't want to make any quick moves in case they were up to something. I could feel my stomach tightening. There was something wrong about this. Something off. I kept my eyes glued to the car in front of me. I could just make out the shape of the driver through the dark windows, sitting there, still. The engine was running, but they weren't moving, weren't even trying to pull off the road. I watched for a few seconds, thinking maybe they'd move soon. They didn't. The longer I stared at the car, the more I started to feel like I wasn't supposed to be here. I checked the rearview mirror again, half expecting another car to come up behind me. But there was nothing. No headlights, no sign of anyone else. Just the darkness stretching out for miles. I was alone. I felt the pressure building in my chest. My mind raced through every scenario I could think of. Should I turn around? Should I try to back up? I didn't know what to do. The sedan just sat there, blocking me in, and the thought of being stuck on this empty road with no way out made me feel trapped. Then, without warning, the driver's side door of the black sedan opened. I froze. A man stepped out slowly, his silhouette dark against the faint glow of the car's taillights. He didn't move toward my car immediately. He just stood there for a few seconds, facing the road, like he was waiting for something. Maybe for me to make the first move. Maybe for me to panic. I watched his every move, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no idea who he was or what he wanted, but I could feel that something was terribly wrong. His body was tense, like he was waiting for something, waiting for me to do the wrong thing. I quickly looked around for any signs of life, hoping for something, anything, that could make this situation feel a little less terrifying. But there was nothing. Just the distant dark horizon and the eerie silence of the empty road. I gripped the steering wheel, my hands shaking. I should have just driven away. I should have tried to turn around while I had the chance. But now, it was too late. The man started to walk toward my car. Slowly. Methodically. No hurry. His eyes never left mine, and even though I couldn't see his face clearly, I could feel his gaze on me, cold and unwavering. I couldn't tell if he was smiling, but I didn't need to. His presence was enough. I hit the horn. Short, sharp, desperate. But he didn't flinch. He didn't speed up. He kept walking, one slow step after another, until he was standing just a few feet away from my driver's side window. I should have driven off, but I couldn't. I was frozen. He knocked on the window with 2 loud taps. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't roll the window down. I couldn't talk to him. I didn't want to engage. My mind was screaming at me to do something, anything, but I just sat there, waiting for him to make the next move. He knocked again, this time harder, then leaned down so his face was right in front of the glass. I couldn't see his eyes, but his breath fogged up the window, and I knew he was staring at me, just waiting. Waiting for me to respond. I finally snapped out of my daze and threw the car into reverse. I didn't even check if it was clear, just slammed the gas and sped backward as fast as I could. The tires screeched as I turned around, driving straight into the oncoming lane and hoping no other cars were coming. I didn't care. I drove for what felt like forever, not stopping until I hit the nearest gas station, where I parked under the bright lights and didn't look back. I don't know what that guy wanted. I don't know if he was just trying to mess with me or if something worse was going to happen. But I do know this: if I hadn't reacted when I did, I'm not sure what would have happened next. I don't care to find out. I was driving home from a late night shift, just one of those nights where you're so tired, everything feels like it's in slow motion. The road I was on cuts through a small town, one of those places you don't really think much about. A few scattered businesses, a couple of houses with that typical suburban feel. I don't know why I chose to go through this town. Maybe I was just looking for a change in scenery, or maybe it was the only route that seemed open at that hour. Either way, I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I hit the red light. I pulled up to the intersection and slowed down, like any normal person would. I'd done it 100 times before. The streetlights overhead flickered slightly, casting an orange glow across the empty road. The whole place was eerily quiet. But something felt wrong. I glanced to my left and saw a row of houses, nothing too fancy, just the usual suburban homes. All the windows were dark. Every single one. No lights on inside, no lights outside. No porch lights, no street lamps glowing from the yards. It felt strange, like I'd stumbled into a place that was deserted. But that didn't make sense, because the cars parked in driveways told me otherwise. People lived here, or at least they were supposed to. I looked to my right and saw the same thing. More houses with dark windows. But what made my stomach tighten was what I noticed next. People. Standing in the yards. At least a dozen of them. All of them in different yards, scattered around. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. They were just standing there, staring at me. I couldn't see their faces clearly in the dim light, but I could tell they weren't looking at the road, or even at anything in particular. They were just looking at me. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. There was something about the stillness, the lack of any sound, that felt wrong. It's not like there were a bunch of people out for a late night walk. No, these people weren't moving. They were just standing there, almost as if they were waiting. The light didn't change, and I found myself staring back at them. My heart was beating a little faster now. I couldn't help it. The whole scene was too unsettling. Every instinct in me told me to just drive through it, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I checked the rearview mirror, nothing. No other cars behind me. Just the sound of the engine and the faint hum of the streetlights. I turned back to the people. There was one woman standing in the yard of the house directly across from me. She was tall, but her posture was stiff, like she was holding herself in place on purpose. She didn't move, not even a little. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, but the thing that stood out to me the most was that she was wearing a white dress. It seemed so out of place, like something you'd see at a wedding or a fancy event, not in the middle of the night in a sleepy town. The wind picked up just a little, rustling the leaves of the trees, but no one moved. The air felt colder than usual, too, like the temperature had dropped in the last minute or so. I shifted in my seat again, tapping my fingers nervously on the steering wheel. The light was still red. My car idled there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just by one or two people, but by all of them. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I told myself to calm down. It was late. I was tired. Maybe they were just waiting for someone, or maybe there was some weird community thing going on that I didn't know about. Maybe they were all just standing there for no reason at all. But the longer I sat there, the more uncomfortable I became. The woman in the white dress hadn't moved. Neither had anyone else. I felt an itch in the back of my mind. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't put my finger on it. These people were still, too still. Like they didn't have a reason to be standing there. No one was talking. No one was walking their dog or having a conversation. The whole thing felt rehearsed, like a scene from a bad movie. I glanced back to my rearview mirror again. Still nothing behind me. No cars. I looked to my left, then to my right. All of them standing perfectly still. No one so much as shifted their weight. I tried to tell myself to relax. This wasn't a big deal. But as I was about to look away from the woman in the white dress, she took a single step forward. I didn't hear her foot hit the ground. She just moved, as if the space between us had closed, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how much closer she was. The problem wasn't that she moved, it was that I hadn't seen her move. She was too still before. I'm not sure what made me do it, but I reached for the gear shift and started to move forward, even though the light was still red. Maybe I was hoping to break the stillness of the moment. Maybe I just wanted to get out of there. I don't know. But the second I began to move, the woman took another step, followed by another, and then the others started moving, too. Slowly. All of them walking towards my car, in sync, like they'd been waiting for something. I pushed the pedal harder, not caring about the red light anymore. My tires squealed as I sped through the intersection. I didn't look back. I didn't care to. I didn't look in the rearview mirror again until I was halfway out of town. I didn't see any of them anymore. The streets were empty. I drove faster, still not looking back. I don't know who those people were or why they were standing in their yards like that. I don't know if it was some weird thing they all do, or if something else was going on. But what I do know is that I've never gone through that town at night again. And I don't plan on it. It was late, maybe around 1:30 a.m. I had just finished a long shift at work, and I was exhausted. The drive home should have been uneventful. I've driven that stretch of highway 100 times, and nothing ever happened. It's a pretty quiet, lonely stretch of road, especially at that time of night. No streetlights, just the occasional car passing by. The kind of drive where your mind starts to wander. I was just about to pass through a small stretch of trees when I saw the flashing lights in my rearview mirror. Red and blue lights. I blinked a couple of times, trying to clear the fog of sleep from my mind, but yeah, there they were. A police car behind me. I wasn't speeding or doing anything suspicious, but I pulled over anyway. I had nothing to hide, so I wasn't worried. But when I came to a stop and glanced in my side mirror, something felt off. The car that had pulled me over didn't look like a regular cop car. It wasn't the usual black and white. It was some older model, a beat-up sedan with some lights strapped to the roof. Not the kind of car I'd expect a cop to be driving, especially not on a highway like this. But I figured it was just one of those budget department vehicles that didn't get a paint job or something. I don't know. I waited, hands on the wheel, eyes on the rearview mirror. I watched as the figure inside the car shifted, and then the door opened. The guy who stepped out was wearing a dark jacket, but it wasn't a uniform. It didn't have a badge, no standard issue gear, no gun belt. Just a plain jacket. I tried to make sense of it, but I couldn't. My mind kept telling me it was a cop, that I was just being paranoid. He was still walking towards my car when I realized something was wrong. His movements were too stiff, like he was trying to be slow and deliberate, but it didn't come across natural. When he reached my window, I rolled it down. I wasn't sure if I was nervous or just irritated, but I didn't have a good feeling about this. He stood there, just staring at me for a second before he spoke. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked. His voice sounded normal enough, but it wasn't just the words that made me uncomfortable. It was the way he said it. Like he was trying too hard to sound official but wasn't pulling it off. "No, I don't," I replied, trying to sound calm. Was I speeding? He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me. His eyes didn't blink. And that's when I realized how dark they were. Like his pupils were too big or something, but it was hard to tell. The whole thing felt off. He finally spoke, his voice a little more flat this time. "Can I see your license and registration?" I dug around in my glove compartment for a moment, trying to ignore the nervous lump in my throat. My hands were shaking just a little. When I handed him the papers, he didn't seem to notice. He just stood there, still staring at me, as if he wasn't really seeing anything. I tried to make small talk, something to break the weird tension. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he reached for the papers, but instead of taking them like a normal person would, he just tapped them. He tapped the corner of my registration with his finger, like he was trying to read it without really looking. I swear to God, he wasn't paying attention. It was like he was doing it to make it seem like he was doing his job, but he wasn't. It's hard to explain, but the whole situation felt fake, like I was part of some messed up show where everyone knew their lines except me. That thought made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Everything looks fine," he said finally. His voice was too flat, too rehearsed. "Just stay safe and keep your speed down." I nodded, but I didn't feel reassured. There was something wrong here. Before I could say anything else, he turned and walked back to his car, never once looking back at me. I watched him as he got in, sat there for a moment, then drove off. The lights stayed on for a while, but the car didn't speed up. It just drove slowly down the road, almost like he was waiting for something. I was still sitting there, hands clenched on the steering wheel, not sure if I should just keep driving or pull over and make sure everything was okay. But the way he walked away, like he had no care in the world, felt off. Like he was in no rush. Like nothing mattered to him. I decided to keep driving. The whole thing felt too strange, and I didn't want to stick around any longer. As I drove, I tried to put the encounter out of my head. I'd been awake too long. I told myself it was just a weird, late-night interaction. Maybe he was just some off-duty cop or a security guard who didn't have proper gear. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My eyes kept flicking back to my rearview mirror, expecting to see those flashing lights again, but they were gone. The road was quiet again, just me and the occasional passing car, but I couldn't get rid of the tension. When I got to the next town, I stopped at a gas station. As I pulled in, I noticed another car parked at the far end of the lot. It was a beat-up sedan. Same kind of car. Same flashing lights on the roof. But this time, the car wasn't parked in a spot, it was just idling, like it was waiting for something. I didn't stick around to find out. I paid for gas inside, but I kept looking out the window the whole time, just waiting for the car to drive away. It never did. I left, drove the long way around, and didn't stop again until I got home. I don't know who that guy was or what he was doing out there, but I know I won't ever be stopping for a car with flashing lights on some dark, empty road again. I was driving home late one night after meeting some friends in a nearby town. It was just me and the open road, the headlights cutting through the darkness as I cruised along the highway, It wasn't the fastest way to get home, but it was quieter, more peaceful, and I liked the solitude. I'd been on this stretch of road 100 times before. The same two-lane highway that cut through fields and trees, with only the occasional diner or gas station to break the monotony. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that made your breath visible when you exhaled, but the windows were up, and the heater was on low. There weren't many other cars around. I'd passed one or two earlier, but they were long gone now. It was just me, the hum of the tires on the asphalt, and the soft static of the radio. That's when I saw the headlights coming toward me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People drove through here all the time. But the car was coming pretty fast, and as it got closer, I realized something was off. The way the headlights were angled, it looked like the car was too far to the right. They weren't on the road properly, like they were veering toward the shoulder. I figured maybe the driver wasn't paying attention, or maybe they were drunk or tired. But then, as the car came alongside me, the driver suddenly rolled down their window and shouted something at me. "They're in your car." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. For a second, I thought maybe I had misheard, but I could still see the driver's face as they passed. They were staring straight at me, eyes wide, frantic, like they were terrified. I don't know what they saw, but I knew one thing: I had to get away from them. I glanced in my rearview mirror as the car sped off, my heart racing in my chest. What did they mean by "they're in your car"? The idea made my skin crawl. I quickly looked at my rearview again to see if I could spot anything unusual in my back seat, but it was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to focus on the road, but the thought kept nagging at me. I kept checking the back seat every few seconds, half expecting to see something in the reflection. I didn't know what to expect, but I was definitely on edge now. My fingers were tight on the steering wheel, and every little sound, every shift in the car, sounded louder than it should. I started thinking back to when I got in the car. I hadn't noticed anything strange when I sat down, but then again, I hadn't exactly been paying attention. Had I forgotten to lock the doors? Was someone hiding in the back seat, waiting for me to notice? I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was just overreacting. But then I remembered something. The moment I had gotten into the car earlier, I had felt a chill, like a draft had blown through. But it was such a small thing, I hadn't really thought much of it. It's just how the car always felt after sitting in the cold for a while, right? I glanced at my side mirror again. The road behind me was empty. No other cars. But the image of that driver's panicked face stuck with me. Why did they say that? Who were they? I couldn't shake the suspicion that they'd been trying to warn me about something that was happening in my car. I made the decision to pull over at the next gas station. It was one of those old, run-down places with flickering lights and a single pump that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I felt ridiculous for stopping, but I couldn't keep driving like this, not with that feeling sitting heavy on my chest. I got out of the car, locked it behind me, and looked around the station. It was completely dead. No one else was around, not even a worker. The place felt like it hadn't been touched in years. I stood there for a moment, just breathing in the cold air, trying to calm down. But then I heard something. It was soft at first, almost like a whisper. It came from behind me, near the car. My head snapped around, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a figure standing by the rear of my car. I couldn't make out any details, just a shadowy silhouette, barely visible in the dim light. It wasn't moving, just standing there. My stomach twisted into a knot. It didn't make sense. I hadn't seen anyone get out of my car when I pulled over, and there had been no one else at the station when I stopped. I took a step forward, trying to peer through the dark. "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in the quiet night. The figure didn't answer, didn't move. The silence felt suffocating. I didn't wait around. I rushed back to my car, unlocked it, and got in. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I glanced around, half expecting someone to appear out of the shadows. Nothing. No one. I sped off, my foot heavy on the gas, not looking back. My heart was racing, and I had to keep telling myself I was being ridiculous, that there was nothing out there. But that voice during your car kept echoing in my head, and I couldn't shake it. I didn't stop again until I got home, the whole drive feeling like I was being followed. But no one was behind me. There was no car in my rearview mirror, no sign of the person who had warned me. When I got inside, I immediately checked the back seat, the glove compartment, under the seats. Nothing. The car was empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next morning, I did a quick scan of the news and social media, but there was nothing. No reports of anything strange happening on the highway. No mention of that driver or any other incidents. I've driven that same road a few times since, but I can't forget that night. I still check my back seat when I get in my car, and I can't help but wonder if someone is still out there, watching.